Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I hope you've been following the series and so you know who I am, but just in case you don't, I'm Karen E. Osborne. I'm author of Getting It Right, and my newest novel, Tangled Lies, comes out on July 22nd. And I'm so pleased to introduce you today to Matthew Arnold Stern, who has
Hello.
such hey, who has such a history of accomplishment, 25 years of accomplishment in his writing life. But we're going to hear all about that. But first, we want to hear about what you are reading or have read recently. Oh, you know what? Wait. I want to tell you a little bit about Amiga, his latest book, and then we're going to ask him about what he's reading. I just wanted you to hear this, so you want to stick with us. So Matthew Arnold Stern, he writes essays, he writes poetry, he writes fiction, he writes nonfiction. This is a truly accomplished man. And his latest book is Amiga. And one reviewer described it, now listen to this, as brilliantly plotted, with seamless prose, believable characters, and one of those stories that stick with you. Now you are intrigued, right? All right. So Matthew, tell us about, before we get to Amiga and your writing journey, is there a book you could recommend to our listeners?
Yes, one thing that I find is that the more I write, the more I read. And I recently read a science fiction novel called Embers of War by Gareth L. Powell. And it's military science fiction, but what's really interesting about it is he talks about the aftermath of war and what it does to the people who survive it. So it's an engrossing novel, and I really enjoyed and recommend it.
Excellent, excellent. And do you have another one?
Well, I'm also finding that I'm reading a lot of children's books because we have a granddaughter, and I'm looking at one called The Safe Return by Ashley Wheelock. And what's interesting, it's a book about the pandemic, and it's about how children can associate with the feelings of the pandemic and the importance of safety. So it's an interesting children's book. So that's one that I hope people will check out.
Yeah. How old is your granddaughter?
She's going to be 8 in July. So
Yeah.
she's actually her birthday is 2 days after my birthday. So we have lots of fun celebrations together.
And my grandson number two is, the
Mhm.
oldest is 14, and number two is going to be 10 in May.
Yeah.
And I introduced him to Jason Lady's two middle grade books, one of our fellow authors. And I also introduced him to Karen Strock, who is an author of, she's a
Mhm.
Renaissance woman that writes all kinds of things, but she wrote a child's book. And he just thinks that he's so impressed that I know these authors.
Yeah.
He's loving their books. And he said, "You really know them, Grammy? You met them?" Yes.
Yeah.
Grandchildren are great. Well, let's
Yes.
start talking about your writing journey.
Mhm. Well, I started writing in high school. I was going through typical teenage stuff, and I found that writing was a good way of dealing with that. And I had a wonderful teacher, Darlene Loyler, in high school who saw my writing, and she encouraged me to write. And I started writing for the Writing magazine at school. I went to Reseda High School in the San Fernando Valley, north of Los Angeles, and wrote for the student newspaper. But then the challenge is how do you make a living with writing?
Mm.
And I got into technical writing. This was in the 1980s. I started for a small Commodore 64 software company, which tells you how far back I go.
Yes.
But those experiences and getting into the computer industry and writing about computers and writing for computers, that was part of the inspiration for my novel Amiga.
So tell us about Amiga.
Well, Amiga is about a programmer named Laura who has to deal with a number of problems in her present by looking back at a past that she wants to forget. And she does that by looking back when she worked for a small software company, and it was a family startup in San Rafael, California. And so the story tells these two experiences in parallel. We see her in 1985 working for the software company and uncovering the secrets and who that are in this family. And then we see her about 30 years later in 2016 going through various family and career situations, including for working for a boss who's now old enough to or young enough to be her daughter.
Mm, mm.
So and then these two stories come together and we find out what happens to Laura and the people that she knew back in San Rafael. So it was a lot of fun writing the book. And I also what's interesting is that there's a huge community of people who enjoy these vintage computers and they actually fix them up, they customize them, sort of like the way people do with vintage cars. So it's fun to get in touch with that community and learn and sort of revisit the computers that used when I was younger.
Were they a good audience for your book? Did they all buy up your book?
Yes, I did get a lot of good responses from them.
That is excellent, excellent. And this book is out already, correct?
Yes,
Yes, when did
that's
it
been
be?
out since November. Yeah,
It's November. So this is
yeah,
something is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and at your local independent bookstore or the library and all those great
yes,
places.
and yes, and you can also find it on Kindle Unlimited if you're a subscriber to that.
Excellent. Now, are you working on something else? Are you working on anything right now?
Yes, I have another book that's coming out. It's called The Remainders, and it'll be out on September 2nd from Black Rose Writing. And again, it's one of these parallel stories where you have a homeless son and his father who's gone through a lot of emotional traumas in his life. And they're located at different parts of Southern California. And the two of them have to connect before it's too late.
That sounds very interesting. It comes out in September. Now,
Yes.
if our audience wanted to be in touch with you, to track and know when your books are available and learn out more about your writing, how could they do that?
Well, you can go to my website. It's matthewarnoldstern.com. That's matthewarnoldstern.com. And I'm also available on all the social medias. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I even have a few TikTok videos, and my tag for all of those is MAS Writer. That's MASWRITER.
Wow, and TikTok, I'm impressed.
You know, what's interesting about TikTok is that there's a lot of good educational materials.
Mm.
And more writers are finding homes for TikTok on TikTok and sharing their writing, giving writing tips. So it's interesting to see how that platform is evolving.
Well,
It's not just people doing silly dances to
yeah,
silly
that's what
songs.
I thought. So
Yeah,
thank you. It's wonderful to know that there are writers there. What an amazing community we belong to of writers. You know, writers supporting each other, helping each other. It's really a beautiful thing. And I
it
hope that
is.
all of you are, those of you who are writers, I hope you're encouraged by all the writers that you've met and the community, the supportive community. And of course, all writers are readers. And then there are readers just writ large. And so I hope you are enjoying the books and that you'll enjoy Matthew Arnold Stern's book, the book that is out, Amiga, and his upcoming book. Just remind us of the title of the new book.
It's called The Remainders, and it'll be out on September 2nd.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we hope to see you next time on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing?
Bye. Thank you very much for stopping by.